The letter came in an envelope the color of old bones, sealed with wax and stamped with an emblem I didn't recognize. A pine tree split down the middle by a jagged crack. I found it wedged awkwardly in the mailbox, its brittle paper warped slightly by the summer heat. It was from Aunt Meredith. I hadn't seen or heard from her in over a decade. My mother never spoke of her, except in clipped tones and unfinished sentences. I barely remembered the woman's face, only a vague recollection of a sharp smile and the scent of cinnamon that lingered in the folds of her shawl. She'd vanished from our lives after some falling out that was never explained to me. And now, this. The letter was addressed to me, personally. That alone was strange. I opened it standing right there at the curb, heart tapping lightly in my chest. Dearest Elsie, if you're reading this, it means I have passed on. I ask for no tears. My time had come, and I went as I always wanted, alone, surrounded by my books and my thoughts. There is a house that belongs to you now. It's in Hollow Pine, just west of Blackridge. You'll find the key enclosed. There are rules, Elsie, 3 of them. They are not to be broken under any circumstance. 1. Do not stay outside after dusk. 2. Do not let anyone in after midnight, no matter how much they beg. 3. If you hear humming from the cellar, leave the house immediately and do not return until morning. You may think I'm mad, but you'll learn in time. Take what's yours. Be wary. Meredith Ashvale. The key was tucked into a small envelope taped to the back of the letter. It was black, with teeth like little fangs, and colder than it should have been in the heat. I stood holding it for several minutes before tucking both into my bag and walking back into the house. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The rules, the odd, almost poetic warnings, the fact that Aunt Meredith had remembered me at all. I looked up Hollow Pine online. There was almost nothing. A few blurry satellite images, 1 or 2 mentions in old forums about ghost towns and forgotten places. No current population data. No recent photographs. A Wikipedia page with barely a paragraph. But it was real. And the house, her house, was real too. And now, apparently, mine. I took a week off work, packed my car, and headed west. The drive was long, a stretch of highways that bled into narrow roads, and then into gravel and dust. My GPS gave out halfway there. I had to rely on Meredith's hand-drawn map. The forest around Hollow Pine thickened as I went deeper, the trees tall and silent, the canopy so dense it swallowed the light whole in some places. It was nearly sunset when I reached the edge of the town, or what used to be a town. A crumbling post office, a rusted-out gas pump, a church with no roof and rotted pews barely visible through the open doorway. All of it dead. But the house at the end of the long dirt road stood upright and intact, like it had been spared by some invisible force. A 3-story Victorian, its paint peeled but not ruined, the windows grimy but not broken. Ivy clung to its sides like veins. The front door was crimson, the only thing that looked recently touched. I parked the car and stood there for a moment, the sun dipping low behind the trees. Everything was quiet. No birds, no insects, just wind. I walked up the porch, my boots heavy on the warped wood, and slid the black key into the lock. It turned smoothly. The door opened with a sigh. The air inside was still and cool. Not musty as I expected, but faintly perfumed, lavender and dust. Furniture was covered in white sheets like sleeping ghosts. A grandfather clock ticked somewhere deeper in the house, even though the power had long since gone. There were no signs of recent life, yet everything seemed placed just so. Not abandoned. Waiting. I found the bedroom upstairs, unwrapped the sheet from the bed, and lay down without unpacking. The drive had left me hollowed out. I didn't even change clothes. I just lay there, eyes on the ceiling, thinking of the rules. Especially the one about the cellar. And then, faint, so faint I thought I imagined it, I heard something beneath me, a low, tuneless hum, just for a moment, and then it was gone. I didn't sleep. The sound had been too brief to be certain of, but it had sunk into me like a fishhook. Small, almost invisible, but impossible to ignore. I lay there staring at the ceiling, every creak of the house amplified by the dark. I told myself it was an old structure settling, the wind brushing against cracked walls. But that hum, it wasn't the house. It had come from beneath the floorboards, from the cellar. The second rule surfaced in my mind like a chant. If you hear humming from the cellar, leave the house immediately and do not return until morning. But I didn't move. I was too tired, too numb from the road and the surreal weight of the letter, the town, the inheritance. I told myself that if it happened again, I'd go. I'd sleep in the car if I had to. It didn't happen again. Not that night. By morning, the house looked different. The sunlight streamed through the tall windows in fractured beams. Dust motes danced in the air like soft snow. I wandered downstairs barefoot, the wooden floor cool and dry beneath my feet. The living room had a massive fireplace and bookshelves lining the walls. The kitchen was old but functional. There was even a small sunroom in the back filled with dying plants and wind chimes that barely moved. I found a kettle and boiled water for tea. My aunt had left behind jars of herbs and dried roots, all carefully labeled in her tight, looping handwriting. I made a cup of something that smelled like lemon and rosemary and drank it slowly at the window, trying to ignore the sensation that the house was listening to me. Later that day, I explored the rest of the house. The attic was filled with trunks and boxes. Old clothes, letters, what looked like journals written in some cipher I couldn't understand. I found photo albums with images of Meredith as a young woman, standing next to people I didn't recognize. Some of the photos were stained or partially burned. Others had faces scratched out entirely. But the cellar door remained closed. It was in the hallway behind the kitchen, a narrow wooden door with an iron latch. It looked out of place in a house like this, older than the rest of the building somehow, the wood a different shade and grain. I tried the handle, out of curiosity. Locked. From my side, that night, I stayed up late reading in the library room. The books were strange, titles I'd never heard of, by authors I didn't recognize. Many were handwritten. One was bound in what looked like stitched leather, and when I opened it, the ink bled under my fingertips like it was still wet. I put it back and went to bed. At 2:17 a.m., I was awoken by a knock at the door. It was a slow, deliberate knock, not frantic, just 3 hard raps on the wood. Then silence. I sat up in bed, heart hammering. Another knock. I checked my phone. The screen glared, pat 2:19 a.m. And then a voice. "Please let me in. It's so cold. I've been out here all night." It was a woman's voice, calm, familiar. I moved toward the window slowly and peered down at the porch. There was someone standing there. She wore a long gray coat, the kind with buttons that go all the way up to the neck. Her hands were clasped in front of her. She didn't look up, just stood there, head bowed. "Elsie," she said. My name, spoken softly, like a mother calling a child home. "Open the door, darling." My throat closed. It was my mother's. But my mother was dead. I stepped back from the window, the floor creaking underfoot. Below, the woman's head lifted, and even though her face was shadowed by the porch awning, I saw her smile. Too wide. Not enough teeth. I backed into the hallway and waited. The knocking stopped. The next morning, the porch was empty, but the wooden floor just outside the door was soaked with muddy footprints, bare feet, small and delicate, like a child's. I didn't sleep that night either. I sat on the bed with a knife from the kitchen and a candle beside me, watching the door. The humming came again. This time it lasted longer. It wasn't music. It wasn't random. It was something close to a voice, like someone humming words they didn't know the meaning of. It rose and fell, almost rhythmic, like a lullaby warped by distance. It came from the cellar. I remembered the third rule. I gathered my bag and car keys and left. I slept in the car just beyond the edge of the forest, parked beneath a crooked pine that looked half dead. The humming didn't follow me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the house missed me, that it was waiting for me to come back, that something inside had noticed me. In the morning, I drove back, because despite everything, despite the voice, the humming, the rules, something inside me wanted answers. And the cellar was still locked. I went to town that morning, not because I needed anything, but because I needed distance. I stopped at a diner, the only one on the main street, with yellowed windows and a menu that hadn't changed in decades. The waitress was an older woman with cloud-white hair in a net and a smoker's rasp for a voice. "You're Meredith's niece, aren't you?" she said without looking up from her notepad. "Yes," I said, startled. "Elsie? I heard you came in. Strange thing, that house. Strange woman, too, but kind. Always kind." I wasn't sure how to respond. She leaned in a little. "You sleeping okay?" I hesitated. "Why?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "That house hasn't had a full night's sleep in 40 years. I tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. It's just old sounds. You know how houses settle. You believe that. You're better off than most, she said. Most folks who stay too long start hearing things they can't explain, seeing shadows in the wrong places, doors that open on their own, or worse, doors that won't open at all. I stiffened. Like the cellar? That made her pause. You tried going down there? It's locked, I said. From the inside, I think. She nodded slowly like she'd expected that answer. Then she lowered her voice. Listen to me, honey. That house was never meant for the living. Meredith knew that. She kept the rules for a reason. You follow them, you'll stay safe. But the moment you break one, she trailed off. I leaned in. What happens? She looked me dead in the eye. It lets them out. I didn't ask who they were. When I got back to the house, it felt different. The silence was heavier. The sunlight didn't reach as far into the rooms. The wind chimes in the sunroom were still, despite the open windows. I stood in the hallway and stared at the cellar door. The lock was undone. I hadn't touched it. The iron latch hung slightly ajar, and the door had shifted open an inch, just enough to see blackness behind it, thick and cold like oil. I backed away. The third rule screamed in my mind, never open the cellar unless you've already said goodbye to the world above. I closed the door carefully, hands trembling, and relocked it. That night, the voice returned. This time, it was a child. A girl, by the sound of it, no older than 10. Miss Elsie, I left my doll inside. Please let me in, please, she cried. Soft, muffled sobs, like her mouth was pressed against the door. Then, I'm so cold. I didn't move. I pressed the pillow over my head and waited for it to stop. It didn't. It went on for hours. I left again the next morning. Drove an hour out of town to a motel and slept through the day. When I came back just before sunset, there were tiny handprints on the windows. Dozens of them. Some high, some low. Like something or someone had tried to peer in. I cleaned them off, trying not to throw up. I needed answers. I started reading Meredith's journals, the coded ones. They weren't in a real cipher. I realized that after a few hours, they were phonetic approximations of an older dialect, Appalachian maybe, but twisted with made-up words, symbols, and shorthand only she would understand. It took me 3 days to piece together a full entry. It read, I heard the cellar singing again. It remembers the children. I told it no. I told it I'm not ready. It didn't like that. It made the mirrors cry. It made the fire burn blue. I've locked it again. But locks only hold if you still believe in them. Another. The first voice I heard was my mother. But it wasn't her. It wore her skin like a memory. It knew too much. Knew things only she and I had shared. That's how it gets in. That's how it learns your name. And another. One day someone will come here thinking it's just a house. They'll think the rules are cute or crazy. But the rules are a pact. Break them, and it's not just this place that suffers. It's everything. The voices are hungry. They wait. They listen. By the 5th night, I couldn't pretend anymore. Something was in the house with me. Not a ghost. Not an intruder. Something else. It didn't walk. It drifted. I'd catch it from the corner of my eye. A shift in shadow, a whisper in my left ear when no one was there. The air would go cold in an instant, even when the heater was on full blast. The cellar door stayed shut. But I knew, deep down, it wasn't locked anymore. It was waiting for me to open it. Or worse, waiting for me to need something enough that I'd open it myself. That was the rule I didn't understand until then. Never open the cellar unless you've already said goodbye to the world above. It wasn't a warning. It was a ritual. Because once you go down there, you don't come back up. I started sleeping with the lights on. Every room, every hallway. The entire house glowed with a faint, humming buzz of electric light. It didn't stop the voices, but it seemed to keep the shadows at bay, at least for a while. I began marking time in hours instead of days. I would wake to the sound of breathing just behind my ear, or footsteps just one room away. Every time I went to check, the house would be perfectly still, mocking me. I tried to leave, packed my bags, started the car. But the road out twisted in ways it hadn't before. A left turn led me right back to the house. A right turn dead-ended at a collapsed bridge that hadn't been there the day before. It was like the land itself had rearranged around me. I tried walking, got 4 miles before I saw the same tree I'd passed an hour ago. A hollow oak with a blackened knot near the roots. I'd scratched my initials into it when I was a child. The initials were still there, but they weren't alone. There was a new carving, fresh and ragged, "Stay." I ran back to the house. That night, the thing in the cellar knocked. 3 times, not like before. This was deliberate. Hard. The sound vibrated through the floorboards, rattling every picture on the walls. I stood in the hallway, just feet from the cellar door, heart hammering. Then it spoke, but not in whispers, not in mimicry, in my voice. "Elsie," it said, "we're the same." I shook my head, backing away. "You remember what it was like," it said, "when she left you, when you waited by the phone for days, weeks, the cold silence, the ache in your bones. That was me. I was there. I am always there." I slammed the bedroom door shut and screamed into my pillow. The next morning, I found every mirror in the house shattered. Not just cracked, obliterated, shards like teeth scattered across the floor. My reflection, gone. Only then did I realize something horrifying. I hadn't seen myself in days. I picked up a shard, careful not to bleed. My face looked different. Tired, sure. Pale. But there was something else. My eyes, too dark. My mouth, wrong somehow. Like it was smiling even when I wasn't. I dropped the shard. It cut my palm. I watched the blood drip onto the floor. The floorboards absorbed it. Not soaked. Absorbed. Like the house was drinking me. The journals grew darker, too. More erratic. Meredith's handwriting deteriorated, lines crossing over each other, ink smeared with tears or worse. One entry stood out. "There is no cellar. Not really. It's a mouth, a throat, a wound that never healed. It calls with the voices of those we miss. That's the bait. That's the trap." And beneath it, "I fed it once. I was young. I didn't know, but it remembered. It always remembers." That night, I found a photograph tucked between the pages. It was me. Not as a child, but as I looked now. Same hair, same eyes. But the smile, it wasn't mine. It was the thing's. The back of the photo had 4 words scrawled in thick black ink. "You've already gone down." I dropped the journal and backed away. My head spun. My stomach churned. Was I dreaming? Had I sleepwalked? Had I opened the cellar without knowing it? I didn't sleep that night. I watched the door, waited. The house pulsed around me, breathing in and out like a living thing. Sometimes I thought I could hear it thinking. By morning, the cellar door was wide open. The stairs led down into pure blackness. But that wasn't what froze me. What froze me was what I saw beside the door. A pair of shoes, small, muddy, mine. The ones I'd lost as a child. The ones I'd been wearing the day my parents dropped me at Meredith's and never came back. They were damp, fresh, as if they'd just been taken off. The cellar whispered, not loud, not threatening, but with infinite patience. "Elsie," it said, "come home." I stepped back, heart thudding, bile rising in my throat. I didn't remember putting those shoes there. I didn't even remember what happened the day my parents left me with Meredith. Just flashes. Her old pickup truck, the smell of cinnamon from the kitchen, the sound of the cellar door closing behind me. That memory. Had it really happened? Or had it been rewritten? I backed into the hallway mirror, one I hadn't noticed before, hanging perfectly intact. And I saw myself. Or thought I did. But the woman in the mirror wasn't backing away. She was smiling, slowly raising one hand, fingers blackened with soot. Her hair floated, weightless, like she was submerged in dark water. I stumbled away. The mirror cracked. Not from a touch, from a scream. From her. A low, guttural shriek shook the walls, and I ran. Down the stairs, through the living room, past the old photographs on the wall that now moved when I wasn't looking directly at them. Outside, the morning was gray, sky hanging low and heavy like a funeral shroud. But something had changed. The woods were different. They weren't dense anymore. They were close. Too close. The trees pressed right up to the house, their roots cracking the foundation. Branches curled around the porch, gnarled and trembling like fingers eager to grab. I saw movement in the corner of my eye. Turned. It was Meredith, standing in the garden exactly where I'd buried her. Only now, she wasn't bones. She was whole and smiling. Her dress was soaked with earth. Worms wove through her hair like garlands. But she stood as if untouched by death. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. I stared. She lifted one arm and pointed, back to the house. I shook my head. "No," I whispered. "I'm not going back." Her smile widened. Then her mouth opened and kept opening. Far too wide. The skin tore at the edges, stretching into something gaping, something impossibly deep. And from it came that voice again. Not hers. Not mine. It's "You never left." The ground buckled beneath me. I fell. No, I sank into the mud, the soil grabbing at my legs, pulling me downward like quicksand. I clawed at the grass, screamed until my throat tore raw. Darkness swallowed me, but not unconsciousness. I landed on wood. Floorboards. I opened my eyes. I was in the cellar. Candles flickered in the distance. The walls were not stone, not dirt, but flesh, pulsing, veined, breathing. My fingers left red prints when I pushed myself upright, and in the center of the room was the thing that wore my face. She turned to me, grinned. "Welcome home, Elsie," she said. "We've been waiting." Behind her were others, a dozen, 100, all with my face, some crying, some smiling, some with hollow eyes and broken mouths, and they sang, soft, tuneless, wordless, the melody of despair. I ran. The cellar twisted as I moved, stairs where there hadn't been any, doors that opened into mirrors, every reflection a different version of me, older, younger, mutilated, laughing. One mirror showed my mother, sitting at the kitchen table, weeping into her hands. The caption scrawled across the glass in blood, "She never wanted you." I punched it. Glass shattered, embedding in my knuckles. Pain was good. Pain was real. I kept moving. Found a ladder. Climbed it. Wood turned to steel. Steel to bone. Hands reached from the walls, grabbing at me, stroking my hair, whispering things I couldn't understand but felt in my stomach. When I burst through the trapdoor at the top, daylight burned my eyes. I was outside. The house gone. The trees gone. I stood in the middle of a wide, barren field, empty, still. I turned slowly and saw one final figure, a girl, no older than 6, wearing muddy shoes. She looked just like me. She opened her mouth, and my voice came out. I never left. Then the world folded inward.